Welcome to the Modular Monolith Architecture course, where you are going to learn how to build modular and scalable applications that can evolve over time to adapt to changing business requirements. I have spent many years building enterprise-grade applications using the Modular Monolith Architecture, and I've compiled everything I learned along the way into this course. So let's check out the course agenda and what we are going to cover in the coming chapters. In the introduction chapter, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the course, share what our objectives are and what to expect from Modular Monolith Architecture, and I'm going to give you a brief about my background if you aren't familiar with who I am. In the first chapter, I'm going to give you a high-level introduction into the Modular Monolith Architecture. We're going to explain what a modular monolith is, how it compares to the monolith and microservices architecture, and we're also going to introduce some module constraints. In the second chapter, we are going to explore some tools and techniques that we can apply to our problem domain to identify potential module boundaries. In this chapter, we will also start building our sample application. In the third chapter, we will be dealing with cross-cutting concerns inside of the modular monolith architecture. In the fourth chapter, which is one of my favorites, we will be talking about module communication patterns, and we will cover synchronous and asynchronous communication between modules, how to implement them, and what are the trade-offs that you would be making when choosing one over the other. In the fifth chapter, we will be talking about authentication and authorization inside of a modular monolith. We're going to introduce an external identity provider and implement token-based authentication and role-based access control. In chapter 6, I'm going to introduce you to 3 ways for how you can enforce your modular monolith architecture. In chapter 7, we will be talking about reliable messaging patterns, and I'm going to show you how to achieve at least once delivery and at least once processing using the outbox and inbox patterns. In chapter 8, we will be talking about event-driven architecture, and I will introduce you to the most important patterns of event-driven architecture. We're also going to see how we can implement these patterns inside of a modular monolith. In chapter 9, we will be talking about a very important topic, which is testing modular monoliths. I'll show you how to write both unit and integration tests and how to apply them inside of a continuous integration and delivery pipeline. And in the last chapter of the core course, chapter 10, we're going to cover how we can take a module from a modular monolith and extract it into a dedicated service so that we can move towards a microservices architecture. There is also a bonus mini course at the end where we are going to introduce MongoDB into the modular monolith and use it to implement CQRS projections. I also want to briefly cover my background as your instructor inside of this course. If you don't know me, my name is Milan and I'm a senior software engineer. I'm also sometimes a software architect, and I say this jokingly because I believe that every senior engineer is also an architect at the same time. I'm a Microsoft MVP for developer technologies, and I've been building enterprise-grade applications for almost a decade. I've scaled applications to more than 100,000 users, and everything I'm talking about inside of this course comes from first-hand experience. I also very much enjoy a well-built monolith application, and I hope that you will learn to appreciate a good modular monolith architecture by the end of this course. Now, let's talk a little bit about the structure of this course. There are 10 core chapters inside of the Modular Monolith Architecture course, and each chapter builds upon the lessons learned from the previous chapters. There is also a bonus mini course at the end that covers some other interesting topics. Each chapter is broken down into 3 to 9 individual lessons. Sometimes these lessons are very long, so take your time while watching this course. Now I want to give you a few quick tips that will make watching this course easier. At the beginning of every lesson, I'll give you a basic introduction into the topic that we are covering and how it relates to the modular monolith architecture. I'm also going to share a simple agenda and what is going to be our goal for that particular lesson. If there are any additional resources that can be of help for a particular topic, I'm going to let you know, and they will be included under the video for that particular lesson. We're going to build a very complex application with many moving parts as part of this course, and because of that, we will not be able to write every line of code from scratch. So I will let you know when you should download an updated version of the source code at the start of the respective lesson. Here is a small teaser of the application that we will be building. It contains 4 distinct modules: the users, events, ticketing, and attendance modules. And this is going to be a general purpose event management system for movies, concerts, theater shows, and similar. This is another overview of the system that we are going to build, and it includes some technologies that we are going to introduce along the way. The main application is going to be a .NET Core application. We're going to use Postgres for the database, and we're also going to use Mass Transit to implement communication between our modules using messaging. Then we are going to introduce Keycloak as an external identity provider and Redis as the distributed cache for our system. When it comes to monitoring our system, we are going to use Serlog and Seek for structured logging, and we are also going to use OpenTelemetry and Jaeger for observability. This is what our system will look like in the final chapter when we transition from a modular monolith into a microservices architecture. You will see that we introduced an API gateway component using YARP, as well as distributed messaging using RabbitMQ. And one of the modules, in this case the ticketing module, was extracted into a dedicated service. In the next lesson, I will share some advice on how you should use this course. It's going to be short and practical, but very important for you to get the most out of the modular monolith architecture course. Welcome to the next lesson in the introduction chapter, and in this lesson I'm going to share some advice on how you should use this course. The best approach to consume the modular monolith architecture course is to watch the course from beginning to end. I'm aware that this is a very long course with more than 10 hours of video, but this is the best way for you to understand all of the important concepts, as each chapter is going to build upon the lessons from the previous one and introduce new concepts and topics about modular monoliths. The second and less preferred approach to watch this course is to only choose to watch the parts that are most relevant to your specific challenges. While I am confident that you will get a lot of value out of this course, even if you choose to watch only specific parts, there could be some important contextual information that was introduced in some of the previous chapters and lessons that you could be missing. So that's why I recommend to watch the entire course from beginning to end. When it comes to the prerequisites for the practical part of this course, you're going to need either Visual Studio or VS Code. My recommendation is Visual Studio because it has native integration for running Docker Compose projects, and we are going to be using this extensively throughout the course. The second thing you will need is .NET 8, which is a long-term supported release, and I recommend that you always install the latest version. Lastly, you are going to need Docker because we will be using it to introduce many external services inside of this course. Examples of external services include Postgres, Redis, Seek, Keycloak, Jaeger, RabbitMQ, and MongoDB. And I want to finish off with a few technical tips. I suggest that you download the OpenAPI specification or the Postman collection for this system that we will be building. My recommendation is using the Postman collection approach because it's also going to include some API requests for external services such as Keycloak. This will make it much easier to test the API that we will be building. My second suggestion is to apply database migrations using SQL scripts. Inside of this course, I'm going to be using EF Core as our object relational mapper, and we will use EF Core migrations to slowly expand our database model. In order to reduce friction while building our application and help you move faster, I suggest that you take the SQL scripts that are going to apply all of the relevant migrations, create the required tables and schemas, and also seed any initial data. And with this, we can conclude this introductory discussion, and we are ready to move on to our first practical chapter in this course, which is called Modular Monoliths: An Introduction.